How do I discover truth? Is the money the actual reason, or is it a smokescreen? So that's the tactical client-facing side. And then what you're mentioning is like, what's the me side? My own holdups around money, my own objections around money. I think almost those are more important.
Hey guys, my question is around money objection with clients. So I feel that most of it starts with me, that objections and that problem of walking through those objections with the clients. How would you go about moving through these inner resistance towards navigating these clients' objections? What would be the questions you would meditate upon or ask yourself or write down? Just curious to hear a little bit about how to move through that money objection within yourself and then to help. I feel like I have objections in the sense of like receiving, so receiving money or receiving clients or thinking that I'm doing a job. That so I can have more fluidity around money objection with myself and ultimately being able to navigate with the clients so that they book the program and things like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think there's multifaceted answers. There's always two sides of the coin, and you're kind of perfectly expressing that, right? There's like the tactical client facing side of like, what's like the tactical things I can say that's going to get a particular outcome on a call. And there's really like no magic thing to say to get an outcome, but there's ways to discover truth. And that's kind of what all of our questions in our sales training is around, is like, how do I discover truth? Like, that's all we want to get to is the money the actual reason why someone can't move forward, or is it a smokescreen? And if it is a legitimate reason, how can we create a game plan for them to be able to do it? So that's the tactical client facing side. And then what you're mentioning is like, what's the me side of like my own holdups around money, my own objections around money. And I think almost those are more important, in my opinion, because you can like say the right things, but without the right conviction or energy or confidence behind it, it's like you don't even believe it yourself. Right. So I think it's like some of the work that's in the training of just like, what are your beliefs around money? Like, what are your negative beliefs around money? Like, is money like something that's been hard for you to talk about, to receive, to feel like you deserve? What are all the things that you're not spending money on in your day-to-day life that you would like to be spending money on? Like, what are all the things that in your mind that, if I had money, I would fill in the blank? For an example, like, this is just a little bit more personal, but like my mother, she has a very scarce relationship with money. She's been like the martyr archetype to a T, like a social worker, school teacher for low-income neighborhoods for decades. And she's like spending her own money on all the school supplies for the kids. Basically, just like I haven't ever seen her like spend money on her own well-being. And she's like stressed all the time. And everything that we talk about is how she doesn't have the money for things. And in my mind, I'm like, just as an example, arbitrary, like, mom, like if you have 50,000 in your bank, like you can factually afford a $20 thing. The way you speak about things, I think, has a huge impact. Like, just seeing, how do I speak about things in relationship to finance and what I can and cannot do based on finances? Because a lot of it isn't true. My mom's like, I can't afford this or that. And in my mind, I don't necessarily say it out loud, but I'm just like, if you have this savings, like you can't afford it. It's just, you're not willing to spend on it because you value the idea of safety, of keeping that money stashed away, rather than valuing the thing that you're spending or that's in front of you that you could spend on. And that's okay. That's a value thing. That's a belief thing. I've shared this before on calls. It's a pretty radical idea, but just the idea that everyone has the same amount of money, everyone has access to the same amount of money, in the sense that money is a dead dude on a piece of paper that's exchanged for an agreed upon value. And there's no lack of ideas that can be exchanged for an agreed upon value. And so everyone has the same access to money because there are infinite concepts to be traded for value. And as long as there's someone who's like had it worse than you, who's doing better than you, then all the sort of situational objections about why you can't make money are kind of irrelevant, right? It's kind of interesting. And I know it's a little bit of a shocking point. It's like, damn, it's like, okay, do I just want to be the man that's like, because of all this reasons I can't, or in spite of these reasons I did? Like, just decide what sort of person you want to be around it. Because like all those things are true. Like when you think about all the rationalizations, the tricky thing about rationalizations is that they're all feel rational. They all feel justified. And one of our gurus, our teachers, shares that rationalization is the intelligence in service of your false ego, your false identity. So rationalization is your intelligence in service of your false identity. So it's helping you comfortably live in a false paradigm. That's what rationalization is for, is to minimize the contrast we feel between reality and our ego. And it's a helpful tool to some extent. And also, like, I think just observing all of your rationalizations, because rationalization is a form of victimhood. Like, in my experience, at least, I see a lot of things I've rationalized in my life, making generalizations, making statements about whatever, why someone else could and I can't. I think like owning a radical self-responsibility perspective of like, no one's responsible for your financial situation except you, not me, not your clients, not the people on your sales calls. You want someone to buy, but it doesn't have to be this person. And when you release the need for the person on the call to meet your financial goals for you, you show up to the call with a certain liberation that people can feel and non-stickiness that allows you to actually make more sales. And that is independent of external results. External results help. Like, believe me, like getting to where I'm in and now, it really makes it so that factually, I don't need to sell anything. Like, I don't need to sell anything. Like, are there people living happily on less than you're making? Yes. Okay. So factually, you don't need it. Like releasing that energy of scarcity and like need and clinginess and stickiness on the call allows you to show up to objection handling without codependency and without your own need for an outcome to cloud your ability to help somebody through their fears. And that is such a liberating thing, in my opinion. And all of us have probably experienced that in our own professional work as healers, as guides, as coaches, as teachers. When we can hold that space for someone, it's very powerful. And yet when money's involved, it amplifies a certain part of ourselves. And I find that interesting. And I find that something curious to look at. And that's what gets me excited about doing this money work, because it's just amplifying what's already inside of you. It hasn't been looked at before until now. More money's involved, more is at stake. That shit was always there. It was just rationalized and underground. And so a lot of people, instead of going after what they want, it's a lot easier to decide to not want it. It's a much simpler option. And like a lot of people see their heroes at chapter 20 instead of at chapter 1. And this was me in the ashram when I was living in the monastery. I saw my mentors like way ahead of me and like serving like celebrity clients in New York City and LA. And I was just like, man, how are they getting all this opportunity and serving all these high level clients? And I'm like, I feel like that's me. Like, I feel like I deserve that. And it was like eating at me, like the comparison, the judgment, the envy, the whatever, not to a gross level, but just inside. Yeah. It's a reflection of our own unmet potential. Judgment and envy is the feeling we get when we see our own unmet potential standing in front of us. And it has nothing to do with the person and everything to do with ourselves. I think a lot of people forget that your hero got to chapter 20 of their story by like experiencing tremendous pain and challenge. And because you're only seeing chapter 20 and it looks easeful, they're like, well, shit, why is it hard for me? It's like, you haven't fucking gone through the fire. I'm sorry to say. Anyways, I don't know what point I lost track of your question. It was about money objection, but we're
No,
here.
this was great. This was great. And I think you did a great walkthrough. The other side that I feel I'm struggling with is like when there's an objection, I accept it too early. I don't like conflict, and that smart screen of that objection feels like conflict to me. So how do you navigate that? I know there's like I've
You
watched
have to get
multiple
over
times.
your own selfishness, right? Because,
Selfishness
oh,
of
yeah.
what?
Oh,
Selfishness of what?
yeah.
I'm curious. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. Your desire to not have challenging conversations is not coming from a place of service to the other person. It's coming from avoiding a certain feeling and avoiding a chance at being judged by another. And that's you wanting to feel good about you, not you in service mode. I'm sorry to say.
No, I mean we're talking about this, and I'm sweating profusely, and like there's discomfort all over my. Just like I'm so
This is me
uncomfortable with this
demoing right
conversation.
now. This is me demoing it because I care.
I appreciate it. Thank you.